Hey guys, so before we start this video, I just want to let you know that this is a compilation video of the ASP.NET playlist that I created. So this is just a video with everything in it. And this course was actually recorded a while ago, so the audio quality and stuff is not that great, but it's not really that bad either. So just bear with it. It was one of the first few videos that I've recorded, so my audio setup wasn't that good. But yeah guys, enjoy the course. And in this course, we're going to be going over the MVC architecture, so models, views, and controllers, and we'll look at this later. And we're going to be using a SQL database and go over CRUD operations. So for CRUD operations, we have create, update, and delete, obviously for items in the database. So for this tutorial, you will need to have SQL installed on your computer. You can do this using SQL Server Management Studio. And just to quickly set up Microsoft Visual Studio, which you will be using. Sometimes when you create a project here, you won't see the ASP.NET Core project there. So you need to search on your computer for Visual Studio Installer. And once this loads, you need to click on Modify for the version you have installed. So I have the 2022 version installed here. And if I click on Modify, you should see an option here for ASP.NET. So you just want to tick that and click on Install. And in this video, we'll be going over creating the project, and then we'll look at the file structure of the project. So to start off, let's open Visual Studio Code. And here we just want to create a new project. So we want to select C# for our language, and we want to select web for the type of project we're going to do. And you want to scroll down to the bottom and you should see ASP.NET MVC Core. So model, views, and controllers. And you want to select this project and click next. And here we just want to give our project a name. So we'll call this ASP course. And we'll click next. And now it's asking which framework do we want to use. So .NET 8 is what this course is about, so we'll select that. For authentication type, we'll just leave that as none. And then we do want to configure for HTTPS. And we'll leave all the other settings as they are. So once that's done creating your project, you should see this screen. And we can just close this. It's an overview of stuff in your project. So the things to look out for here are the folders. So we have controllers, models, and views. That's our MVC structure. Properties here, which we won't be working on in this video, but just to look at what's inside of there, we can see that these are the profiles we use when we click run here. And if you click on this drop down, you can see we have the other profiles here which are described here. So the models, views, and controllers, how does that work? So in the views folder, we'll see HTML pages. Here they'll be labeled as CS HTML, that's C# HTML. And these are the actual pages that it renders when a user goes to a specific URL. And then we have our models folder. We won't look too much at this right now, but we will start looking at it when we include our database. And then we have the controllers folder. And you'll see here we have a home controller. And if we look into the views, you'll see a home folder here. So this controller is the controller that we use to tell the application which view to serve. And since it has the word home here, we're talking about the home folder here. But we'll get into that more later. For now, let's just look at what's inside. So you can see this is just a C# class file. And we have a few functions here, one called index and one called privacy. So if we actually run this project, we should get back a web page. This is the default web page that it creates when you start a new project. And in here you should see two links, home and privacy. And that's actually what these functions here are doing. So you can see it says return view and it doesn't pass any parameters in. So that just means we're returning the view with the same name as the function. But we'll look at this more when we create our own controllers. For now, I just wanted to show you that this is where the index and privacy on our project is coming from. So when we click on home here, it's actually running this home function. And when we click on privacy, it's actually running this privacy function. And those functions actually look inside this views and home folder for the files with the same name. So this is just a quick video about something I forgot to mention in the previous video. And that's in this views folder. If we run this project, we can see that it has this navigation bar at the top. And it has these links on it and stuff. But let's just close that project. So in our views folder, if we actually open the index page, we can see that that's not actually in here. We just have a div with some text that says welcome and stuff. But the actual navigation bar and stuff is not showed in here. So that's actually in this shared folder here. And if we open that, we can see we have a underscore layouts file here. So when we're building our project, we don't want to create a separate navigation bar for each page on our website. And that's what this underscore layout file here does. So this is where the main layout that will show up on all pages that we have in our project is. And we can see it has the links here for home and the link for privacy. And here it has this thing called render body. So when we create a page like this index page here, everything we write here goes into this render body, which is just inside the body of our HTML page here. And then the navigation bar and stuff just comes from this layout file. So if we wanted to change the navigation or add a footer, this is where we would do that. But for this project, I'm not really going to work with this file too much. I am going to add another link here when we add our database to like view the stuff inside it and stuff. But yeah, this is where the layout is coming from. And if you're wondering how that gets injected into the index file, it's actually through this file here called view start. So this sets our layout to the underscore layout file. And there's one more file in here called view imports. This is just which libraries and stuff we'll be using inside of our views. Because remember, this is CS HTML, that's C# HTML. So we will be using some C# functions inside of the HTML views. And this view imports is just where we import all of the stuff that we'll be using. But for most cases, it will automatically get put here whatever we want to use. So we won't really need to touch the view imports file. And in here we want to connect to our database. So I'm just going to open the SQL Server Management Studio. And in here we just want to make note of the server name. So here we can see the server name. And we just want to copy that. And then we can close this. There is also a way of checking it through this Server Object Explorer here, but we won't be using that for now. So in the app settings.json file here, this is where all our environment variables for our project live. So if you need to store some sensitive data in your project, this is where you'd store it. We just want to add a new parameter here called connection strings, and you can see that comes up automatically here. And this will open another array thing here. So in this we want to add a default connection, or you could name this whatever you want, but I'm just going to name it default connection. And for a value here we want to add the connection string to connect to our database. So to build our connection string, we'll say server, and that's where we'll paste in the server name here. And then we add our semicolon, and the next parameter we want to give it is the database name. So we'll say database is equal to, and here we'll give a name for our database. I'll just call this ASP course, and we'll add our semicolon here. And the next parameter we want to give it is, we are using Windows authentication. So if I come back to SQL Server Management Studio, we'll see that here it's using Windows authentication type. So to make that work, we actually need to set trusted connection to true. So trusted underscore connection, and we'll set that equal to true. And this is the basic connection string we'll use to connect to a SQL database. If you're connecting to a different type of database, you may need a different connection string, so you can just Google how to set that up. Also, if you have a username or password, you can Google how to add that into the connection string. But for this connection, this should be fine. So we'll just close this. And now we want to add a few things to our project. So we want to click on dependency, and we want to right click and say manage NuGet packages. So in here we want to go to browse, and there's a few packages we need to install. So we need to install entity, and you can see here we have entity framework core. So we just want to select the latest version that works with ours. So usually, like if you have .NET Core, which is what we're using here, we have version 8. We want to install the same version of Framework Core, so version 8. And we want to install this. The next thing we want to install is the tools for it. So if you scroll down a bit, you'll see Entity Framework Core Tools. And the last thing we want to install is Entity SQL. So here we have Entity Framework Core.SQL Server. And that's the last thing we want to install. So what is this entity package that we're installing? Well, that's what we're going to be using to connect to our database. So in our project here, we want to create a new folder called data. And inside of that folder, we want to create a new class file called application DB context. So this context file is inside of our project. We're going to pretend that this is the actual database. So when we want to add stuff to our database or delete stuff or update stuff, we're going to work with this file. And this is going to inherit from the default DB context class. And this class comes from Entity Framework Core. So this is how we're going to be connecting to our database. And here we just want to add a constructor, and we're going to say options here, or DB options. That's the type of this parameter, DB context options. And it's going to be of the same type as what we just created. So application DB context. And we're just going to call this parameter options. And we're going to pass that to the base DB context class. So in here, we're not really going to add anything, but we are going to add a DB set down here. So to use this DB set, we first need to mention what type of objects we're going to be storing here. And the DB set is basically just a table. So we want to go into the models folder here and create our first object. So we'll create a class here, and we'll leave that as class, and we'll call this products. So here, this is just a model, so we don't actually want to put any real code in here. We just want to create the properties that the table will store. So we want to create a public int of ID, and this is the ID field that will be in our database. So by default, if we name this ID, it will automatically be a key, primary key of our database. But if we wanted to really specify that, we could say key over here. And this is a data attribute. So by writing this above our property, we're saying that this is going to be the primary key of our database. So we can also add the required tag here, and we're going to say name. So this is the name of our product, and then we're going to have a price. And I just set that to decimal. And since we have required here, that means it has to be passed in when the user creates something. So we're going to have an ID, name, and price, and the table name is going to be products. But right now I've actually named this file products, but I actually want it to be named product, so a singular name. And I'm just going to change the name of the file here. And that should be fine now. So in our DB context again, we want to now add this DB set. So we'll say public DB set, and we'll say the type is product, which is the model we just created. And we'll call it products. So before we go any further, the reason why we named that product and we named the DB set products with the S is because this model is one product. So this is what one product would look like. And this name here is actually what's going to be passed to the database. So when we create the table name is going to be this. And now we'll look at how that actually works. So there's one more thing we need to do, and that's in program.cs here. You'll see that there's some services here, and we need to add our application DB context into here so that it can get injected into all of our controllers and we have access to our database. So to do that, we want to say builder.services.add application DB. It's add DB context. And here for the type, we want to say application DB context. And then for the parameters, remember this takes our options parameter here. So we want to say options, and then we want to do some lambda expression. And we want to say options dot use SQL. So that's the SQL NuGet package that we installed, and this takes one parameter, and that's the connection string. So we'll say builder dot configuration dot get connection string. And this will fetch a connection string from the apps.json file which we edited earlier. And remember, we named that connection string default connection. So let's just open that and make sure we spelled it right. And now there's no errors here, so we should be able to run this. So to run it, you want to go to Package Manager console. And if you don't see this down here, you want to go to Views and then find it in here to enable it. And then you want to say add-migration. So this is going to add a migration file to our project. So it won't automatically update the database. It will first give us a file showing us what it's going to do. So that's what this migration file is. And we'll just call this initial. So now we can see it added a new folder here called migrations. And this is the file that it just created. So you can see it's going to create a table. And the name is going to be products, which we defined in the application DB context here. And the columns is going to be ID, which is going to be the primary key, name, which we set in the product model here, and then price. And the constraints here, we can see that it's going to be setting the primary key to ID. So if we're happy with the migration that it just created here, we're going to say update database. And don't worry about this error up here. I accidentally typed database update before. The correct command is update database. So if everything worked correctly, we should see that it was added to the database with these columns and names. But here we get an error saying the certificate was not trusted. So we need to edit the connection string here and set trust certificate equal to true. So if you get this error, you also need to add trust server certificate equal to true here. And now if you run this, it should work correctly. So it says done. And if we open the SQL Server Management Studio and we connect, we should see that now in our database, under databases, we should see ASP course, which is the one we just created. And then we should see tables here. And now we have a products table, which is what we just created. So if we right click and click on select top 1000 or something, we should see that now it has the correct fields which we set in the products model. So it has the ID field, the name field, and the price field. So with this, we have our database set up correctly. So now that we have our database set up and connected to our project, we want to create our first page. So this will just be an index page that lists out all of the items in our database. But first we should actually put something into our database. So I'm just going to do a quick insert statement here. So insert into products, and we'll only pass in the name and the price since the ID will just auto increment. So we've just added a product here called ball, and the price we set to $25.99. So if we execute this, it should added one item to our database, and we can see that here. So now let's work on adding the index page for our database in our project. So first we're going to create the view here in, well, we're not going to put this in the home folder, we're going to create a new folder. And this folder, we'll just call it products. And the same way we had a home controller for the home folder, we now want to create a products controller for the product folder. And actually, let's just name this product instead of products. So now we want to go to controllers and then add a new controller. And we'll just set this to empty here. And we'll call this the product controller. So in our product controller, we have one function, and this is just returning the view. So when I first showed you how controllers work, I told you that if there's no view passed in here, it returns a view with the same name as the function name. So in our products folder, let's create a view called index, which this will return. And here we don't need any of this, so we'll just delete that. And right now let's just put a h1 tag and just make sure that this is working. So one more thing we need to do is we have the function here, but we're not actually calling this function anywhere. So in the shared folder on the layouts file, we want to add one more link to the nav bar. So we'll copy one of these and we'll just paste it in here. And for the controller setting here, ASP-controller, we don't want to be using the home controller. Now we want to be using our product controller. And these tags here, if you're wondering, the area we won't really work with this in this course, but the controller is basically the controller file that we'll be using. We don't have to include the word controller when we write it here. And then the action is the name of the function we're going to be using. So we're calling the index function here. And here we'll just change the text. So now if we run this, we should have another link on our nav bar called products. And if we click on the products link, it should take us to the page we just created. So that's working properly. Now we want to actually use the database and list out all the items in our product view. So to do that, we actually need to get an instance of the service we injected into the program CS file. So this is the DB context that we injected into our program. And in the controller file, to get an instance of this, we first want to create a private read-only variable. And this will be of type DB context, which is what we injected. And I'll just call this _DB. Now this won't actually have the service which we injected here. This is just a blank variable. Basically it's going to be null right here. And to actually grab that instance that we injected, we want to do a constructor. So you can do that by typing CTOR and pressing tab. And in here we want to take a parameter. And the parameter we want to take in the constructor is the same service we injected using the program.cs file. So it's of type application DB context. And we'll just call this DB. And right here I set this to the wrong type. So that's supposed to be application DB context. And then we'll set this _DB, which is a global variable that we'll be able to use throughout this controller file. We'll set this equal to the injected one we have here. So I hope you guys understand that. I know I didn't explain it that well. But next what we want to do is we actually want to use this DB now, which remember is our application DB context, which has the table in it. So we just want to get all the items in the table. So in our index function, we want to create a variable and we'll call it products. So here we're just getting the db.products. And the way we access that is we use our db context here, and then we say dot and the name of our table. And there's one more thing we have to add here, which is toList. So instead of using var here, we could just say list of products. So this would also work. And now into our view, we actually want to pass this products parameter here. So now we're returning a view and we're passing in the products. And in our view, we can work with this by, at the top, we do at model. So this is, when we type at model here, we're expecting to work with a certain model in this file. And you can either get that model from the return here, or if we weren't returning anything, this would work with the blank model file here. So if we type product here, and we didn't return anything here, then this would be a product model with all the values just set to null basically. But since we are passing a products list here, then this product is actually going to be the list. But we do need to set this to list as well. So we're working with the list of products. And now we just want to create a table. And in the table, we want to set the class to table. So this class of table is just the bootstrap class that we're going to be using here. And then it gave us some basic table rows and some table data. So for the table rows, we actually don't want table data in here. We want table headers. And the first header we're going to be using is the ID. So we'll just call that ID. And then we want another table header. This is going to be the name. And then one more for the price. So now we want to add another row, but this time we're going to loop over the list and add one row for each item in the list. So we're going to do @for, or we could just do it like this, and we'll say for each, we'll call it product, or we can use actual type here. We'll name the variable obj in model. So here we're saying for each obj in model, so each of these will be one item in this model, so one product. We're going to create a new table row. And inside of it, this time we want to put table data. So for the table data, we want to use obj, which is the current product that we're working on, .id. So we do need to use this @ symbol here when we're working with variables and stuff. But yeah, now we'll just fill in the name and the price. So now this should be good. We're passing in a list of products here, and then we're getting that list here in the model parameter. And here we want to use a capital M when we're saying model here. So we're just looping over that list of products, and then for each product we want to create a table data out of the ID, the name, and the price. So let's run this and see if it works. And you can see that now we're getting the data from our database. So now we've seen how to get data from our database. We want to now create items in the database. So I'm just going to add a button to the top of our index here, the product index. And this is just going to be an A tag. I'm using an A tag because there's actually a class in Bootstrap that makes this look like a button. So I'll set the class equal to btn and btn-primary. And that will just make it look like a button, and then use this as the color. And usually for A tags we use the href, but in ASP.NET we actually use ASP-controller, and then we give it the name of the controller which we created called product, and then we use ASP-action, and this is the function inside the controller that we want to call. So we're going to call the create function here, and then for the text in here we'll just write create. And in the product controller we're calling this create function, but it doesn't exist, so we'll just create that quickly. So we'll do public iAction result and then create. And iAction result is basically the type of function we want to use for all of the functions in here. So now we want to use our create function, and here we'll just return a view. We're not going to do anything with the database here, we're just returning the view, and then we're going to create the object inside the view. So right now we don't have a create file in our product views page, our products view folder. And remember, because we named this function create, it's going to return a view called create since we didn't pass in a view name here. So let's just create the create view. And here we just want to add a model on top of product. And remember from the last video I said if we pass in something here, we can use it as the model. But if we don't pass in anything here and we write model at the top, this is just going to be a blank model with nothing in it. So basically all the values in here are going to be null. And that's what we want since we're creating a new model here, or a new instance of the model. And in here we just want to put a form, and I'll set the class equal to form, which is another Bootstrap class. And for the method we just want to set that equal to post, and that's it. So the stuff we want to get inside our model is the ID, name, and price, but we don't actually want the user to fill in an ID here, so we're just going to make that hidden. And we're going to do input, and we're going to say ASP-4, and now we're going to say what this is for. So in our model this is for the ID field, and this way of doing it basically handles, instead of saying type here, we say ASP4ID, and then we'll automatically set this input to the correct type for ID. So if we didn't do this, we'd have to use type is equal to number or something like that. But in ASP we can just do this quicker by using ASP-4 and then which parameter this is for in our model. And also there's one more thing we want to do here, which is we want to make this hidden. And then we want to add an H1 or H3 here, and we'll use this as a heading for our next input field. And that field we're going to call name, or we'll say product name. And then we'll add that input here, and then ASP4, we're going to set that to name, and we'll make one more here for the price. So this will be another input, and then ASP-4 will be the price. And right now we don't have a submit button here, but I just want to run this and see what it looks like. So now you can see we have this create button here, and then it takes us to this form. And these input fields are actually small, we want them to fill up the screen. So we're going to add some more bootstrap here just quickly. So the class we add is just form control, and that will make it look a bit better. So this looks good. We might want to add some more spacing here, but for now this is fine. And then we just want to add the submit button down here. So we want to use input, and this time we do need to fill out the type. And we want to say the type is submit, and we don't want to give this a name, because what happens here is when you're submitting a form to send to a database, if you give this a name, this input will actually register as one of the things we're passing in. And obviously we don't have a submit thing in our database, so we don't want this to get passed in as a parameter. So for value here, this is going to be the value of what's written on our button. So we're going to say create here. And now if we save this, when we click this button, notice we put a method here, but we didn't put an action. So this is going to return it to the same function. So it's going to return it to this create function. But this is actually a get method of the create function. When we submit this, it's going to go to a post version of this function. So let's create that here. We'll add our data tag here. We'll say HTTP post, and then under this we'll create the post version of this function. And now we're going to HTTP post. We're handling the create function, and we're taking a parameter of product, and we're going to call it product, or we could call it obj here, just so we know what we're working with. And when we say the word product, we know we're talking about the type, not the variable. And here we just want to say if model state dot is valid. So this model state dot is valid, just make sure that this object is a valid object for our database. There's no errors in it or whatever before we pass it to the database. And if it is valid, we want to add it to the database. So we'll do _db dot products dot add, and then we'll pass in our object. And if that is added correctly, we now need to save our DB, because remember when we created those migration files. So when we created these migration files, it didn't just automatically add stuff to the database. It first made this migration file, and then if we were happy with what it did, we could say update database, and then it added these fields in. So the same thing happens here. When we add something to the database, it doesn't just automatically push it into the database. We need to do _db.savechanges. And now remember, we call this iActionResult. This is what we're returning. And we haven't returned any views or anything here. So down here, we want to return. And actually, we'll do redirect. We'll redirect to action. And we'll call it the index action. So what's going to happen here? It's going to redirect to an action within this controller, and it's going to use the index one here, and that's just going to take us to the index page. And hopefully, if that worked correctly, we should then see the new object that we added on our index page. But if for some reason something went wrong here and the model state is not valid, we need to return something. So we'll do return not found, or we'll do not found. So this is just an error. It's going to say not found basically. And if we run this, everything should be working right now. So we'll go to products, and then we'll do create. And for our name here, we'll say this is the batch, and it costs 52.99. And here, if you look, this create button is sort of overlapping here, so we want to add some CSS to that. But for now, let's just click on this, and we get some type of error here. So I've just paused the recording there to figure out what the errors were, and there's actually two here. So in the create form, we don't need that hidden input field for ID, so I just removed that. And then here we forgot to say return. So on the HTTP post create function, we need to return the redirect to action. And now if we run this, it will work. But I've already created our second entry here, so let's just create another one. And we'll call this glove, and we'll set the price to 30,00. So now it's working. We added this new column, or this new row, to our database. And now that we have this create button working, we just want to fix this quickly because the style is really bad here. So we want to add the class of btn, and then btn-outline. We'll do outline primary, and we'll save this. Also, it was overlapping a bit, so we want to set the M margin on the y-axis to 3, and that will give it a margin on the top and the bottom of 3. So that looks a bit better. It just has the outline, and then when we hover over it, the color comes in. So now that we know how to create and get the items from our database, we'll just close this create and index file here. And now we want to work on deleting. So to delete, we want to create a function in here called delete. Or actually, let's call this remove item, because if we name that delete, there might actually be a function in C# or something called delete that we don't want to accidentally override. So we'll take an int ID here, and we'll return a view. But we don't just want to return that view, we want to do something first. But before that, let's actually create the view here. So we'll do add view, and that's in our product folder in the views folder. And it'll just be an empty view. We'll call it remove item. And something went wrong there, so let me delete the one that it created and add that again. So now we just want to delete all of this, and we basically want the same stuff that's in our create file. So let's open that, and we'll just copy all of this and we'll paste it in the remove item. But here we want to say ASP input 4, we want to make this disabled, so the user can't type anything here. And then here as well, we just want to make this disabled. And if you wanted, you could also add the ID field here and make that disabled, but we don't really need that, so I'm going to leave that out of here. And for the button, we want the type to be submit, the value to be delete, and the same class. Actually, we can change this to BTN outline danger. And again, when we click submit here, we didn't add an action here, so it's going to submit to the same function, remove item, but the post version of it. But first, there's actually one more thing we want to do. So we have this disabled, but we actually want to show the user what the values they're deleting are. So here we want to do value is equal to this model, so at model dot name, and then here on the price one, we just want to do the value as well, so at model dot price. And right now we're not passing in any model here, so this is just going to be a blank product. So we actually want to find the correct model here using this ID that we're getting, and then pass that into the view. So let's just leave a few lines here, and we want to do, so we want to say product, that's the product type. We're going to do a question mark here to say that it might be null, and then we're just going to name this obj, and we're going to set it equal to underscore db dot products, and you can see it suggests us to use this find function here, and that's fine, it will work here. But the problem is here we're using ID, and that's, if we use the find, that will work fine. But if we were searching by a different parameter, not the ID or not the key, then we'll have to do this differently. So let's just do it differently, even though we can just use the find method here. So we'll do dot where, and in the parameters here, we're going to put another lambda expression. So we're going to say where x is x.id is equal to ID. So this lambda expression is basically returning x. It's getting all the products here, and then it's only returning x, where x.id is equal to the ID we passed in. And then here we're doing first or default. So if it doesn't find anything, it will just return null into here. And since we made this nullable with the question mark, it can handle that. So now we're going to say if obj is equal to null, so that means it didn't find what we're looking for, then we're going to return not found. And if it did find something, we're going to return the view with obj. So here, remember, we're expecting a product model here, so instead of being blank, it's going to be this obj product here. And now if we run this, we should see that that works. So we don't actually have a button to take us to that delete page. So let's create that quickly in the index page. We're just going to add another header here called actions. And then for the data, we're going to say td. And we'll make this big because later on we're going to add the edit button here as well. And we're going to do an a tag with the class of btn. And then we're going to set the ASP-controller to be equal to, and we're going to set that equal to product, and we're going to set the controller equal to product, which is what we just created, and then ASP-action, we're going to set that equal to delete, or remove item is what we named it. And now if we just close that, and we'll call this delete. We should now see a delete button here. We didn't give it a color, but we'll do that later. So if we just delete this glove item, it will now take us to this blank page here. So we'll close that. And the reason why it did this is because, remember here in the product controller, we're expecting an ID. But in the form, we didn't pass anything. So the parameter we need to give it for that is ASP-root. And then the name of our parameter. So it's ASP-root dash the name of our parameter, which is ID. And we'll set that equal to what is it? So it's obj. So the current model we're working with is obj.id. And now if we run this, it should work correctly. I might have needed to wrap that in quotes, but no, it works correctly. And now we can see this is grayed out. We can't type anything here, and we can only hit this delete button. But doing that right now won't do anything because there's no post method here. So we could have just deleted it inside this method, but it's better if we show the user the data so that they can decide if they really want to delete it or not. So now let's just create the post version of this. And this will actually take the entire item, so we don't need to just take the ID this time since we have the item in here. And we're going to say product obj, and then we're going to say underscore db dot remove obj, and then we're going to save changes. So the command to remove something from the database is just remove. Then we need to save changes to make sure that actually went through to the database. And then we just want to return redirect to action index. And that will just take us back to the index page. So let's try this. We'll delete the glove item. And now we've successfully deleted that. So the last thing I want to do just before I end this video is I want to change the color here. So So we'll set the class to button and the color to btn-danger. Not sure what's wrong with this index file, but my autocorrect thingy isn't coming up here. So now that should work correctly. We see the delete here, it's red. We click on it, it shows us the values, and then we can hit delete to get rid of the item. So we've gone through getting the data from the database, creating an item, and removing an item. And the last thing we need to do for this course is editing an item. So let's create a new page called edit, and we'll do it in a product folder here, view, empty view, and we'll call this edit. So we'll remove all this, and we'll basically just copy from the remove item. This time we don't want it to be disabled, but this time we do need to include the hidden field for ID. So we'll say ASP-4 ID, and the class, we don't need to fill in any of that because we're just going to have this be disabled. And this is just because when we're updating, we need to pass in the ID as well. So this looks good. We want to change the value here to update. Yeah. So now we want to create the function for it. So we'll do public iActionResult. And we name the file edit, so we'll name the function edit as well. And we will take that ID parameter again, so int ID, and we'll basically do the same thing we did here. So product, and we'll add the question mark to make it nullable. We'll call it obj, and we'll set it equal to underscore db dot products dot where, and then we'll say x.id is equal to id, so that's correct. And then we'll do if obj is equal to null, we just want to return not found, or else we want to return the view with obj. So that will bring us to this edit view, and let's just run this and see what it does. Oh, we didn't add it to our index file there. So on index, under actions here, we want to add another a tag, and we'll set the class to btn and btn dash, let's see, we'll do secondary just to have something different. And then we'll say ASP controller, so this will be the product controller. Now when we were using this ASP controller function all this time, we only need to pass the ASP controller if we were working in a different controller to begin with, but this index file is already in the product controller product section, so we don't really need to pass this in, but I just always pass in the controller just in case. And then we want to do ASP-route-ID, so we're giving it an ID parameter here, and again this is going to be at obj.id, and we don't need those quotes as we saw in the above delete version. And then we'll do ASP-action, and we'll set this to edit item. I think we just named it edit here. Yeah. And then we'll add the text edit here. So let's just see what this looks like. we have the edit here, and if we click on that, it will take us to this edit page. Right now we disabled this, but we didn't hide it, so let's do that. And let's not make this disabled, or let's just leave it as disabled and hidden. The reason why we make it disabled is maybe someone will edit it somehow and pass it in. But yeah, this should be fine. Now we want to handle what happens when they click the submit button. So HTTP post, and we'll create this edit function again. We'll name it edit. And this time we'll take a product and we'll call it obj. And this time we just want to update the product that's in our database with this one. So to do this, we actually need to do this if model state is valid again, because maybe they passed in some data that's not valid. So we want to do if model state dot is valid. Then we want to, let me just fix that. We want to underscore db dot update obj. And then we want to save changes. And we want to return redirect to action. And then we'll redirect to the index action here. So basically same as the create function here. And then we want to return not found if we didn't find the, actually it's not that we didn't find it, so we want to return bad request or something. Or actually let's just return to the view here, because there's one more thing I wanted to show you guys. So if this doesn't work, we'll just return back to the same edit view, and in here we have ASP4. Yeah, that should work. And then under here we want to say span, and this is why we're returning back to this page. We want to say span ASP-validation for. So we'll see how this works in a second, and we'll say for name. And basically what this will do is, if there's any error, it will add it into the text of the span, so the user can then see what went wrong. But I don't think we can actually cause an error to happen here, because this is taking a string and this is just taking a number. Maybe we can pass the number wrong and see some validation. So we'll do span ASP-validation for, and this is for the price. And that should work correctly. And let's just run this. It will build errors. So it looks like we forgot the closing curly braces here. Let's see. So now if we run this, it should work. We see our edit button here. If we click on it, we can update something. So let's set this to, let me try putting A here and see if that gives us an error. So one thing we can do to figure out what's going wrong here is if we set a breakpoint here. So we'll just set a breakpoint there, and we'll run this, and we should be able to see what's going on behind the scenes. So we'll click on edit, just type some random thing in here, update, and now if we look in the obj, so valid, and then the price is invalid. So let's just go one step forward. It goes to return view. I think I see what's happening here. So we're returning a view, but over here we're returning just the view, and because we're not passing in an object here, this is going to be a blank product object. And then here we're calling model.name and model.price, which there's no value inside the product right now, it's null. So to fix this, we need to pass in the same data that it gave to us. So we'll send obj back, and now this should work. So we'll do edit here, we'll pass some random values, we'll click update, and now we can see it is working and it does give us the validation. So it says the value ASDA is not valid for price. So now if we give it a correct value like 29,99 and with update, it will update correctly. So again, just to recap, we need to create our edit view, which is basically the same as our delete view. We just remove the disabled from the inputs, and then we added this validation here, which we had an error with, but it was just because we didn't pass anything to the product here. So when we were calling model.name here, there was no .name value stored in here, so we passed that into here. And let's just quickly add this validation to the create view as well, just so that we have validation everywhere. We'll do span ASP validation for, and we'll do name, and then here we'll do span ASP validation for, and we'll do price. And then if the crate didn't go off correctly, we want to return back to the same crate view, and we want to give it the same object that it tried to send to us. Well, we don't actually need to pass in the object here because we're not using value here. Remember, in the edit thing here, we were passing in a value of what to write in the text boxes, but here we're not doing that, so we don't need to pass anything in here. So let's run this, and let's try to create something with the wrong type of data. So for product name, we can't really mess that up. Test. And then for the price, now we'll put some random letters, and we'll say create, and there we get the validation on the create as well. So now let's do everything correctly just to show that everything is working. We can create a product, we'll call this batch, we'll make it 32.99 or 32,99, we'll create it. Now maybe it became cheaper, so we'll edit it, and now it became 25.50. So that works, and then we'll delete it. So delete, and that works. So this is the end of our ASP.NET course. We've learned the MVC, models, views, and controllers architecture. We've worked with the SQL database using our application DB context and injecting that into the C# program file. And then we've done CRUD, create, update, and delete. So we've covered everything in this course, and I hope to see you in the next course.